everyone. Hello from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on today's event on opportunities for deep tech and adjacent technologies in agri-food, organized by SGInnovate and ID Capital. My name is Jody from SGInnovate, and for those of you who may be more new to us, we are a global investment company set up as a private entity and funded by the Singapore government. We have the mission to build deep tech innovations from Singapore and for the world. We do so by investing in and helping to build deep tech startups in the various fields of AI, medtech, quantum tech, and increasingly, we're also starting to look into newer areas such as urban solutions and sustainability, advanced manufacturing, and food and agri-tech. We also work closely with entrepreneurial scientists and clinicians to help bring their innovative research from lab to market, as well as develop tech talent and engage with the vibrant deep tech ecosystem. Part of our initiatives to strengthen the deep tech ecosystem and generate conversation and knowledge sharing are through community events such as the one that we have today. Amidst all of the buzz in the agri-food space recently, today's webinar will focus on our discussion on leveraging opportunities in adjacent deep tech domains and how this can actually help to contribute to the industry's potential growth opportunities. And we definitely hope that you enjoy the session. Without further ado, I'd now like to pass the time over to our moderator for the day, Isabel, the founder and CEO of ID Capital, for her opening remarks before our panel discussion. Isabel, please.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you to SGInnovate to welcome us today. Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you today. I'm the founder of ID Capital. We are a private investment and consulting company headquartered in Singapore, and we are specialized in agri-food tech, as we call it, with a focus on Asia Pacific. We are publicly known for our Future Food Asia platform, and if you feel like we are very loud at the moment, first, it's a good news to me because our annual conference is around the corner. And what it means is that it's a 5-day marathon for us, but it should be the most convenient, insightful, and friendly conference for you where you have time to have a lunch break, stretch your legs, and we really hope that everybody who has a very deep interest for the sector will join us. We wanted to bring this conversation to you, and it's a very important one for many reasons. First, the agri-food tech sector is having very good momentum, as Jody said before. We see corporate startups, investors jumping on it as the climate change relating stakes get higher. Just on the very, very hot alternative protein sectors, you might not know, but there are 600 startups worldwide on this at the moment, and the stakes are really, really high. So the question is, are we doing enough to address them? Can technologies from different industries pivot and come to the rescue of the agri-food industry? And this topic is also dear to me because I'm a defector from my former industry in a way, moving to agri-food in turn. So we could talk about it with distinguished speakers today, which I'm very happy to welcome. We have with us Dr. Ritu Bala. She's currently the Senior Connexus Manager for the Agricultural Research and Innovation Center, also known as AGRI, at Republic Polytechnic. The AGRI Center looks into applications of advanced technology for urban farming, and Ritu oversees research and teaching programs. We are very happy to have her today also because she has brought together expertise and technologies from different fields, and she knows what it takes and what it means. Next with us, we have Gary Lowe, who is the Executive Vice Chairman of Sun Moon Food Company. And Gary had many lives. He started as a banker for 15 years, then had this background in the food trading business and experience in scaling companies in the food industry. And really, this new venture that he's going to talk about is a new chapter of his life, so to say. I'm mentioning the company that is called Dimuto, that leverages blockchain, IoT, and AI to digitize the agri-food supply chain, providing end-to-end supply chain visibility for global businesses. Thanks for being with us today, Gary. Moving to Dr. Min Wan Lee. Wan Lee also had several lives. He was the former Chief Scientist Officer at Alibaba Cloud. And 2 years ago, he founded North Summit Capital to help fund the integration of cloud computing and artificial intelligence technologies into more traditional industries, including, guess what, agriculture, but also manufacturing and healthcare. And when I heard this 2-3 years ago, we were working with ID Cloud, and I said to me, we need a talk. So you will hear from him why agriculture is so core to his fund. So one bit for being here today. Then we have Hans Bieder, last but not least, I should say, who also had a few overlapping lives. So Hans started as an offshore engineer, became a very young, successful entrepreneur, businessman in the oil and gas sector, and after a successful IPO, he found that he was too young to retire. So his curiosity drove him to explore several new territories, and one of them has been food. He will talk about Compass Food and how they've developed an innovative emulsification technology for the food, beverage, and nutraceutical industries. And the company has a state-of-the-art factory and laboratory complex here in Singapore. Thanks to you, really from the bottom of my heart, for being here today. We know you are very busy. So I would like to ask you why this topic is important to you as well, not just to me. Who wants to start? I see Gary speaking.
Oh, am I supposed to be there? But no, we haven't introduced Dr. Ritu, right? I think we have. Oh, we have? Okay.
We have, absolutely.
So I was waiting for you to go finish Dr. Ritu first before we say anything.
I've started with her. So yeah, the question is,
first.
Yeah, absolutely. The question is, why do you think this notion of there are innovations in other domains of technology and science, and they could be, in some instances, relevant? So why do you think this is an important topic for you, Gary, Ritu, Wanli, and Hans?
Yeah, well, for my part is when I first started as a finance banking side of the game, I think we in terms of our innovation, it was all semiconductors, right? It was all in computer chips, technology, microprocessors. You know, I was very much an investor kind of mindset and stockbroker, banker, doing that field. And really, as you go down into this industry, one of the companies we even saw was in fashion, even a bit linen company. And then when I finally get into agriculture, it was like the last bastion of where technology has not filtered in. And that's like the biggest dinosaur in the whole ecosystem. And it's been doing many things in the old way very comfortably, but actually in a way that actually hasn't been very helpful because there wasn't very much information and data. So for me to come into this area was, I think it's the right time. A lot of the technology like microvision, cloud computing, the use of AI, the use of IoT has come to a price where we now can apply it in this giant dinosaur industry that can actually make it work in a much better way where margins are low, where the economy of scale is there, but yet the margins aren't there to support that kind of innovation. So when the price has come down to a level where innovation now basically allows us to use the technology to power up an industry that needs to be powered up, and it affects all our life and mankind, then I think this is what drives me in coming into this industry now.
And I guess, Wanli, you have a slightly similar stance on this, right?
Yes, actually, so I echo what Gary just shared. So I believe this dinosaur has to be rejuvenated. And by rejuvenation, I mean the tech infusion. So imagine, so for the labor intensive, it used to be a labor intensive sector and highly dependent upon the manpower. And now today, if you have all the machinery, the equipment, and coupled with the digital technology and the sensor, the precision agriculture, as you can name it, and the yield per acre, and also the cost of the irrigation and the fertilizer will be highly optimized, and the whole efficiency will improve to an unprecedented level. And in a way, if we use the manufacturing industrial standards from that perspective and do a mapping about how the agri-food was produced, and we see that there's a great space for improvement. And I'm a deep believer about the high tech, even though it's originated from internet, but the biggest value creation could be way beyond the internet. And where I believe the agriculture is the place where we will see not just the value creation, uplift of the value creation from yesterday versus tomorrow, if we have this tech infusion.
What about you, Ritu? Would you say you see value creation at the doorstep?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's been a lot of value creation. I mean, if you look at the entire agriculture, the way it's being done is changing. You know, the whole landscape is changing at the moment. Like the vast open fields. Now we're going back into the labs and using artificial lighting to do the plants. And you know what? The interesting thing is that now when we're doing it indoors, is we're using LED lights and we are using hydroponics. And both these technologies have been there for quite a few years. But why didn't we do it earlier? You see, so now is the time when we have all these different aspects of technologies coming together. I mean, the AI, as Gary mentioned, and also Wendy mentioned, right? So all these data that we have now, we can put them together. And of course, there are other driving factors as well, right? The increasing population and the climate changes, concerns of food security and safety. So definitely necessity is the mother of invention, but then only when these inventions happen, we can put them together for something like we are seeing here in the changing landscape of agriculture. So for me personally, it's a very exciting time. And definitely I share that excitement with my students as well.
Thank you so much, Hans. From your position as an outsider, finally in the industry, how do you see the importance of innovation for this sector and innovation that can come from any possible domain?
Well, I think that this is a confluence of many things coming together in one go. And I think maybe one of the more important one is that we've gone through a financial expansion since 1982 up until now, where money has been controlling things, and industries has been mostly financial more than the real industries. And now we are swinging back into real industries, because during the financial expansion, you get consolidation of companies. So, and when you get consolidation of companies, innovation disappears. So it's the entrepreneurs and the engineers and the innovators that starts the businesses, and then it becomes taken over by CFOs, and CFOs don't innovate anything. They just run things. And
no CFO in the room, I hope. That's okay.
Sorry, you know, some CFO of course can do it as well, but it tends to be that way. I think that the availability of technology, for example, analytics, analytical tools, HPLC, GCs, all these different instruments that you can use now, and then you can run instruments much faster than you used to be able to, has also enabled new technology to be applied in the industry. So I think that, and then we have the third one, which is also the fact that things used to be centrally manufactured. Everything was, you know, you got the palm oil or whatever, you got it into one location, and then there was a huge plant was manufactured, and they manufactured the food oil, and then they sent it off to Europe, etc. And now people are worried about, you know, food security. So now you're talking about smaller plants and smaller and more local production. The fourth issue, which also is playing in here, is the fact that you have a much higher awareness of the carbon footprint of each plant and what amount of carbon you use to produce the end product. And all of these are coming together in one place or at one time period, and that is what's really driving the change in the industry. And when you have change in industry like this, you have huge opportunity to get into to do new things. And like Gary showed with Demuto, that and that's a very obvious. Sorry, not an obvious. That's a good way of taking advantage of changes in the industry. So for all of those that wants to get into this industry, this is huge opportunities here, and you know, it takes a little bit of guts, and you'll have a happy life. And not only that, but you'll do a good thing for humanity.
Yeah, as well. And innovation is very inspiring, I have to say. So let's talk about innovation. But let me first share a slightly provocative insight. I was once with a group of corporate executives from the agriculture industry. And one of them was asking the others, all veterans, and he was asking, what do you think has been the most important, the most disruptive innovation in this industry over the past 20 years? He was asking farmers in a community of farmers that he was really belonging to. And he was relaying this information, this feedback to his peers. And he said, the farmers said, it's just the air conditioning in the cabin of our tractor. So if it's really what the industry has delivered over the past 20 years, you could feel like either it's a bit disappointing or it's a bit unexpected. And conceivably, there is a penalty in being an incumbent player. You're more on working on incremental innovation and maybe not on disruption. So let's talk about this. Incremental improvement for agri-food won't be enough. But between the myth of the inventor and the reality of the industry, how do you do when you don't come from this industry? And you as an example, before we talk about talents at large, tell us more. So for instance, Wendy, you've crossed that bridge. You're not coming from the agri-food industry. Tell us about your journey. You were into data and predictions before. Have you predicted your entry in this field?
This question is to me or to Gary?
To Wendy.
To Wendy, oh, sorry, okay.
Wanted to know if you had planned, if you had an algorithm telling you that eventually you will get into investment in agriculture.
Yeah, actually, I think my return to agriculture, even though it's not well within the prediction, but actually it's deeply rooted from my personal experience, personal journey, because I came from the countryside in China as a farmer's family. So my parents were as a farmer for almost 30 years. So my childhood memory, basically I know how hard it is to be a traditional farmer in China, okay, without the power of technology. And now today, so having the access and having awareness of the power like the sensor technology and also the machinery. So I believe that it's time for me to projectile the technology, either by myself or either through investment to enable some other agri-tech technology company, okay, to projectile the technology to that industry. And for example, when I did some project with one of the clients in China for the milk industry, dairy industry, so they produced, they were the largest, the dairy and yogurt producer in China. So in the old-fashioned way, they produce a lot of raw milk on daily basis, but because of the production scheduling was not well synchronized, and that creates a lot of wastage because the raw material, the raw milk wasn't able to schedule to put into production before the expiry. So, and we did a very simple things. We just stitched the data together from two systems. One system is the manufacturing execution system, MES, the production plan. And also another system is the raw milk production system plan. And put the data together and you know how are you going to dispatch the raw milk to the right production line in order to create the optimal supply and demand. And that save the wastage of the raw milk by 9%. So that's one example to show how the digital technology, how the data technology can significantly reduce the wastage in the agri-food production and also improve the whole process efficiency. So I made my decision after I had successfully delivered this project, and I believe that it's time for me to inject more energy and focus in this area, I mean agriculture area, by my technology part and also by the capital part together, putting technology and the capital together as a compounding factor to enable more startups work together toward this industry, the agriculture. So I believe it's a personal journey and a return to the origin of where I came from. And of course, with a different ammunition now, capital and technology.
I see. What about you, Hans? You also change, gears. What would you say has been the most difficult part in discovering a new industry, the food industry, for you?
The hardest part of getting into a new industry is that the smart people don't want to talk to you.
So do you mean that people talking to you are dumb?
No, they don't know, but they don't know, you know, when you want to get into an industry, you want to learn from the best. And, you know, people that have time, people that are the best don't have time to talk to you if you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really hard to overcome. So you have to assume when you get into a new industry, you have to assume that whoever is talking to you at that time don't really know the industry that well.
That's an interesting
proposition. It's a terrible way to say it, but it's the truth. And
I agree with Hans though.
Yeah, I've gotten into I've changed industry twice in my life, and each time it's the same thing. And the second time I changed industry, I was much more aware of it, and it allowed me to get to the right people much faster, because I knew that these people, even though you think that these people know a lot, but then you realize after a year or so, you go, oh, this guy didn't really know that much.
Gary, you followed a slightly different path. You already knew the industry, somehow the trade at least, but you came with a new novel proposition that you hadn't experienced before, blockchain based. And I guess people might have told you, what do you mean by blockchain? Why do you need blockchain for fruit and vegetable logistics? How was it for you?
Yeah, I think taking both Hans' point of view and Wan Lee's point of view. I mean, for Wan Lee, he talks about, he came from a farming background. I cannot say I come from a farming background because I come from a finance capital background, and I'm the other way around. But the investment I made is into China. We were basically the biggest grower of Fuji apple in Shantung. It's 2,100万亩, which means it's 1,900 hectares of plantations, which is probably 1/3 the size of Singapore. So for a Singaporean out of nowhere, no farming background, to dive into that, and then literally like what Hans says, you go into a brand new industry from finance into agriculture, and the people who really talk to you are really the people who don't really know, because the people who really know are definitely not talking to you because they're too busy doing what they do. And that's one of the reasons, back to your question, Isabel, about why did I come out and do this blockchain thing? It's really one of the things that I look at the blockchain for me was, it's to me a very fancy Excel spreadsheet that we can make sure that everybody can see the data and no one can change that data. Because all of us has our own ERP system, our own Excel management system, but the problem in our silo world, not many people actually ran operations where I had to run 1,900 hectares of farm, 40,000 metric ton of packing houses, selling to 22,000 points of sales and to 400 million households throughout China, because Wan Lee, I'm also related to the Alibaba's group as well. So yes, right, to be able to see this, we're too busy knowing this industry and running this industry that we forgot how to even talk to anybody else because we're just too focused on the problem. And I think having to leave my main job as and just stay on the board and then focus on what I'm doing at Dimuto is really another way of saying, I think like what Wan Lee is doing, take capital and technology and compound it is really what this philosophy is all about. But for this to happen, it all goes back to microscopic data that can be put together so that it can be shared and seen, right? So that's sort of like the journey that I've done. And to me, blockchain really helps us to spread the truth and put the custody of truth in an area where no one can then go and change it, which is usually happening right now.
I really like the way you make blockchain look like very simple when there are so many people trying to make blockchain completely impenetrable. It's really refreshing. So Ritu, I believe you hold the key of the solution because you're in this teaching academic position and you see that there is a limited pool of people active in agriculture in Singapore. I could believe it's an opportunity because you can build the next gen agricultural capabilities with a clean slate approach. Is there a natural demand for such modules? How have you built the programs? Can you tell us more about it?
Well, definitely. I mean, we do see a limited pool of people who are active at the moment in agriculture in Singapore. But definitely, I mean, it makes it a bit easier to start with a clean state. And but we do have to keep in mind that that also means that we lack the experience, so which is very important as well. So that is something that we need to partner the age-old experiences with the new technologies that we can adopt. And that's what exactly we are doing in terms of designing our courses. So recently there's been a lot of demand for agri-tech and training in agri-tech, because I mean, like Wanley and Gary as well as Hans were talking about the capital investments and all the other technological investments. So we come in with a human investment, right? You need the talent. The industry is growing rapidly. You need, you're ramping up your production, but you need the right skill set. So for that, we have been, the demand is there, the need is there. We need to train this new set of growers with the technologies and the new things that our people are seeing here, and how do they work with them. So we have developed our, keeping all our courses have been developed, of course, with the consultations with our various stakeholders. That will be our farmers, the consumers, as well as the various agencies, and even technology providers. We get their inputs in order to design the course. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind is the learners' need, the need of our learners, right? So for example, we have a diploma that is a 2.5 years course, and is run in a part-time mode. Why part-time? Because this is offered to the adult learners who can spare their time after their day jobs, and then they can take on this course. And as they go—
And who are these people? Sorry to interrupt you, I'm curious. Who are these people? Can you give us a bit of a Chinese portrait of the people coming to get their training?
So it is a varied group. It's a very, there's a lot of diversity in the learners that we have for this group. And there are people who are learning this in order to understand agriculture better. Some of them have already started their businesses and they want to know how do they go on to it. And there are some who are actually considering this and they want to start up a new farm or new business in this area. So during the whole course, they will learn about the plants, like what plants are, what are the needs, how we grow them, the systems available, the technologies available, as well as they'll go into the commercials of agribusiness. And then sustainability, how do you do your sustainable agriculture? So it's been catered to these. While there will be some pool of learners who may not have this time of 2.5 years, or they are still thinking, is this the industry for me? Is this something I want to do for the rest of my life? So they could have, or they just want to know what is all this agri-tech about, or are we capable of doing the local production? For them, we have like a 2-day course, which is run in a face-to-face mode. And they can really come and have a hands-on feel, touch and feel of various equipment, the plants growing in the lab, how would a farm look like? So for them, we have the Agriculture 101, which is a basic introductory course. Well, we also have an e-learning course. This is for them, and especially in the pandemic world today, when the physical training may not be possible or not so conducive, then they can do it on an e-learning mode. So the agriculture technology course that runs a 100-hour e-learning course, they could finish it. And then on the other side, we have a group of learners who are actually already having a farm, right? And they have been doing this for some couple of years or even more. And then they want to now see how can they distinguish from the others, right? How can they do a much more better harvest? For them, we have a sustainability agriculture course that is run in terms of their clean and green standard that was recently rolled out by Singapore government, right? And then you also have this new shift of doing plant factories, growing plants in almost like a factory setup. So we partnered with Japan Plant Factory Association in that. And then we offer a 2-day course with the experts from there doing an online course on the first day. And then on the second day, the participants come on our campus and then they can actually learn all these things. How do you? So it's geared toward a more master class. So it's called a master class. So at every point, we need to keep in mind our learners' need and then cater it with the industry demand. So, very important for all our designing of our courses has been that, each and every participant must have a takeaway. So when they go back, they can deliver better in whatever they're doing, in whichever way they're contributing to this industry. And even to get their interest and, be beneficial, we really have to keep the focus on the learners' needs.
I'm sure you're grooming a lot of future entrepreneurs if they're not already entrepreneurs. So let's talk about the funding thing. As soon as we talk about deep tech and disruptive innovation, very often we talk about greenfield projects, we talk about risky projects. So the next question is, how do you get them funded? And I'm turning to Hans. In your case, sounds like it was your decision to dedicate part of your financial resources to this new business in food. How did you take this decision? Curiosity was a driver, you said, but what else? How did you decide it was really worth it?
That is a very difficult question to answer, because financially, it's been kind of a heavy burden to carry for quite a while before it really turned around. And when you start something new, it always takes you 3 times as much time, and it costs you at least 3 times as much money as you think it would.
That's not very encouraging.
No,
no, it is. It is. There is hope. There is hope.
It's not encouraging, but it's reality, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Gary can.
It's fair.
Yes, 100%. Maybe I'll say 4 times rather than 3 times.
But shall I say, if you had known in advance the hurdles, you would just never have gotten started. So it's a good thing that you have ignored it.
Yeah, I think that most people, most entrepreneurs will say that. I think any business takes at least 10 years to build up. At least 10 years to get a good business to work, unless you are very, very lucky and hit, you may be making money from day one, but it doesn't become a significant business until you're, at least 10 years into it. So anyways, back to the question, what drive me to do this? And it's kind of a strange question. I spent most of my first part of my career, I traveled everywhere, because I was doing business in Brazil, United States, Nigeria, Angola, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. So I spent so much time traveling, and I said, I want to do a business where I don't have to travel anymore. So that's how I started. And then I started looking at what business can I do in Singapore. Okay, I must have a business where I can build up a product which I think is going to have some benefit in the future. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what product could I make that was good for humanity. What was good for humans. And then I learned that a lot of the emulsifiers that are because our factory makes an emulsifier, a lot of emulsifiers are made from petroleum products. And I thought, that's crazy. We're eating stuff that is made from petroleum. Doesn't even make any sense. So then I started looking into emulsifiers, and then I found that there was a way to use an enzymatic reaction method for doing this. And that we worked on that for a while, and then eventually we found another way of doing it. And yeah, so that's how I came about doing it. But I think that if you are starting up today, and if I was smarter when I was younger, or more experienced when I was younger, I would ask myself, what is good for humanity? And then I would, and if the business that you're looking for is not good for humanity, you should probably not do it. Mm. Because the thing is that if you're doing business that is good for humanity, things flow a lot easier. You don't have to fight so much. And you don't have to think so much about having to make money everywhere, because you're actually adding value to humanity. You're adding value to society in one way or another, and society will find a way to pay you.
So it offers me a brilliant transition to Gary.
Yes.
Did you find investors buying into the idea that if you're doing the right thing for humanity, they should fund you? Very often VC funding getting VC funding is an uphill battle. What did you think of it? Do you think having a very strong purpose has really helped you in your fundraising so far and will keep helping you? And you're on mute.
Thank you very much. No, I like to join into Hans' view. I think it's a journey that entrepreneurs who basically design a purpose. I think the reason why I came out to do Dimuto, I think it's very related to the questions that is actually in Q&A, Isabel. If I don't mind, I saw some of the Q&A questions. It was talking about integrating the technology. The other one is how do you link the entire value chain? And John asked about comparing it in the ERP. It is this journey that I've gone, is because I was kind of a unique person who comes into an industry where I was not only just farming, not only was I packing, I was also selling. And then when you talk about sustainability and you talk about food waste, there's so much that I see on my own reality of food waste at the farm level, not just at the retail level, right? Many of the incidents that we see are very much on retail level waste, and they talk about 30% food waste. But a lot of the people don't really see what is actually at the beginning of the food chain. So back to the questions that people are asking, I think the reason why I am stepping into this space to do this is because a lot of people keep going deeper in the silos in trying to get more tech going into farms, or more tech going into packing, or more tech going into food science, for example. But where I was looking at is maybe the way we were missing was the way to connect, right? To do a horizontal link. And this is the approach. And where I found the biggest pain point was the messy middle, right? Between what you produce and what you deliver. It was this messy middle that has to be addressed. And I used technology to first address this and then capture all the necessary data. So once I cleaned up the messy middle, so it was more like to first digitize it, then I organize it, then now I can capitalize it, right? And then eventually we can talk about optimization, right? So this is kind of like the journey and like what you said about purpose. So that was my purpose. If I was looking at all this thing about sustainability and the knowledge that I've already gained in the 10 years that I have been in the agri space, to me, I understand where the real issues were, and therefore trying to put this all together allows us to combine it. And when people say about things like ERP system that John talks about, we had a fancy ERP system, but the problem about ERP system is it is organization, it's an enterprise level. Again, very silo, and you don't open up your enterprise level ERP to other person. So this is where the blockchain was one where we could use, right? That fancy Excel spreadsheet that we use. We saw that, what are the things that we can share? What are the things that we can do? And I think one more point, the way we look at things are also very different. We don't see the ecosystem where every stakeholders are equal. Actually, we think that the buyers and the sellers are the key characters that drive a lot of the things we do. And it's from here, if you can get rid of the messy middle, then you can lazy chain a lot of the other information onto it. So that's sort of like back to those questions by Ken Yu and John. I think that's sort of like the philosophy that we have actually adopted.
And this notion of messy middle reminds me of what I could also be willing to discuss with Wanli. So you had, I guess, enormous opportunities in very hype sectors in a big market like China, mobility, consumer products, energy, and you chose, amongst others, agriculture. Agriculture is said to be daunting. You have to wait for the harvest cycles to tell whether your innovation has been working, and then you're dependent on the variation from one season to another one. So why did you choose this? Many investors would say agri-food tech requires very patient capital. VC investors are not designed to be very patient. What's your stance on this?
So first of all, I believe that this is an unconventional approach. Let's take a contrarian strategy, because all this like the internet, the e-commerce, social networking, whatever the sectors, is super hot. It's so crowded, crowded by tenants. I mean, the number of highly educated people and also capital. So it's so crowded. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't make additional benefit if another fund participate and focus in that area. So basically, for me, I take the unconventional approach to look at, okay, if we look at the agricultural force, fundamentally, this industry has to be rejuvenated. And second, the timing is now, because I personally did projects, so I see the value creation. And third, I believe if we are using the technology to solve the right problem, and we might have a very big first mover advantage. And that first mover advantage is quickly turn into a competitive advantage. And the farmers, whoever embrace the new technology and fundamentally optimize the expenses, the cost in the production, they might have the price advantage in the market, in the consumer market, and then they can do consolidation. Even though we know the CFO do not innovate, but essentially, if you have innovation and then you will have a good CFO and play a very good story in the capital market, right, eventually. So I believe that the notion of being patient, equate patience versus the agri-tech investments. somehow we have to revisit that notion, because I see some disruptive technology like the vertical farming with the OLED technology, and the energy efficiency is significantly better than the traditional natural sunlight, and also the production yield is much better. So I see that the critical point, the tipping point, is getting closer and closer. So that means the first mover of adoption, the new technology, having higher likelihood to enjoy the first mover benefit and become a next generation's the dominating or even leading players in respective sectors. So that's why even from the traditional capital return perspective, the investment in agri-tech now could be a very rewarding process and also a rewarding choice. Okay, not necessarily mean that you have to wait for 10 years or decades to go.
And this will bring me to another question on how you evaluate your investment targets, but bear with me for a second. So we talk a lot, you seem to be very confident, Wanli, that you can get portfolio companies able to convince a CFO, which is a non-believer, that their innovation is good. And yes, you need to trade a bit of CapEx for better OpEx over time. That's a bit of the equation that comes into play. But we talk a lot about the need for a multidisciplinary approach, sorry. So the question very often is not just to convincing a CFO, it's about convincing the head of R&D and the head of open innovation and the head of agronomy and the head of so many different departments and the marketing and the sales channels. And I go first to Ritu as an academics. What do you think makes multidisciplinary work and innovation difficult, but also powerful? And you've been in the middle of this process yourself. How do you unlock the best of the various talents around the table when they talk different languages?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Sometimes they're really talking different languages. And just like what Gary mentioned, they are, our technologies and our processes have been very much in silos. And when you have, taking, as we call it, as the adjacent technologies being put into this agri-tech now, and they were built for something else, right? And you're talking with people with expertise of different quality, right? How do you make them understand and talk in the same language? So this is something that we really have to, be more open about. And in fact, at our Agri Center itself, we have a multidisciplinary team. For example, for me as a plant scientist, and then my other colleagues who are also biologists and scientists, right? We are working on the plant. We know what the plant does and what the plant needs. But when it comes to growing the processes and, growing them at a larger scale, you need automation. So we need to go to the engineers to talk about this part. So we get help from the School of Engineering. Then the School of Infocom helps us in getting, things like doing IoT solutions and data analytics to see how the treatment of our experiments have been, how the plant has been responding. So all these things need to be covered. But I see when the messy part comes in, like what Gary mentioned, the messy middle, is sometimes when we are trying, getting these technologies to work for ours, and we don't have the expertise on the other side, right? So I may have an understanding of my plan, but I do not understand so much of the engineering part or maybe the data analytics part of it, right? So I mean, definitely we work in team, it gets solved. But what could be a solution to unlock this, I believe, is training. If we could have our new next gen of talent that is being developed to have an exposure of it as an early stage. And we have been doing that for our diploma as well. So you see, they learn about the plant science, then they go on to learn a bit more on the plant, the farming systems and all, right? In fact, our students, they are using CAD, the computer-aided design, to do the farm layout. As a plant scientist, I never learned that, I can't handle that, but my students can. So that is what tells us, the next generation of the talent that we are developing has to have much more exposure to these different technologies. And then I believe it might be much easier for them to understand. And there are no more, the silos are not there because we have some common language to speak, like what you said, right? So
Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Very interesting. Wanli, on the receiving end, when you receive an investment opportunity, you find that it's prima facie quite interesting, you go deeper into due diligence and you diligence the team. How do you weigh in the domain expertise, the team composition? What do you think of a business where the team are complete outsiders? They've never been in the food or in the agri industry. Would you credit them for being able to think out of the box?
So I credit partially, okay, in the sense, first of all, they got to have a technology background, but actually what's more important, the decision factor is how deep they understand the industry. I mean the agriculture industry. If you're only talking about deep learning to farmers, it's not going to work. So they have to step out of the box and then think out of the box. I mean, the box is a tech box. So more often than not, a lot of a tech company, they stay within their comfort zone of being tech company, okay? But they didn't really step out of the box. So now, suppose a company has a reasonable root, deep understanding of the technology, plus a combination of a certain understanding of the domain expertise in the agriculture sectors. More often, you will see that in the founding team, they might have one expert, SME, subject matter expert, SME from the agricultural food industry, okay, together with some high tech like the blockchain, like the AI, whatever, okay. So this kind of combination of the team is an example of success. So from, at least from tenant's perspective. And second, you might want to evaluate what kind of problem they are trying to solve. Mm-hmm. So whether that problem can be quantified, I mean the impact of the solution can be quantified, or even better, can you translate from the CFO perspective with their solution deployed? And how much the CFO get additional value on their balance sheet? If that mathematics can be carried over and do the calculation, and that means for each return, and we know that each investment, we know the return, and then this company will be much better shape than just some hand-waving tech companies. So I always look at what problem you are going to solve. Is this a real problem? And do you have the right understanding of the root cause of the problem, which SME should have? And plus, do you have the right technology combination to attack this problem? If all these questions, the answer is yes, 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 and then probably this is the right target for you to consider investment.
Got it. And then I'm going to have a chemistry question. And the chemistry question is for Hans, but it's not real chemistry. So you have built teams with very different backgrounds. How do you blend these people together? How do you make sure they work as a team with the right chemistry? And has it worked for you? Did you have some experiences of building multidisciplinary teams?
Yeah, a lot of experience with that. And my opinion about how to get the right team has changed quite dramatically from when I was younger. So I think the number one thing is, Min-Wan Lee talked about multidisciplinary. So, you know, in order to, if you want to bring tech into agriculture, you got to have somebody that has domain expertise in agriculture or has experience and knows how the agriculture sector thinks and how they behave. If you don't have that, it's very difficult to be successful. But anyways, the people that is in the business, number one, the person that leads the business has to be an excellent communicator. And he has to be someone that, or he or she has to be able to communicate and understand where there's lack of communication. And he has to be able to bring people together so that there's a cohesiveness. And he has to be able to break down the barrier. And he has to be able to correct where there's mistakes being done. And the person has to have a lot of high energy because it takes a lot of energy to do this. So that is the most important thing. If you have that person in place, then a lot of the other things will just fall into place by itself. And Min-Wan Lee has a very structured approach to things. My approach is a bit more intuitive, I think. I look at the people more than anything else, who is involved. If I can't get myself to be excited about the people that's behind it, then I will not pursue it, even though it sounds really great. The project sounds fantastic, because, you know, a good project with bad management is still a bad company. But, you know, a bad project with good management can very easily become a very good company.
And the next question would be, how do you find a good CFO? Because I understand you have a story with the CFOs. So I'm smiling because we've spoken a lot about how decisions are taken and how innovation needs to prove itself as being a viable case. But it's a very interesting insight, adding color to this notion that people come first, for sure, but why? And this level of energy, this capacity to embark multidisciplinary teams seems to be very important. I see the clock ticking, and I would like to keep a little bit of time for some very interesting questions we have received, not all of them, sadly. One of them might take you out of your comfort zone. One of the person is asking how we can conceptualize the way deep tech can plug itself into agri-food tech. For instance, in terms of product demand matching, production, or pushing new frontiers of urban farming. Do you have a kind of conceptual framework in mind as to how deep tech can come in?
So Gary's gonna try to answer this, because I thought I wanted to jump in as well. If you notice the panels and the thing that we talk about deep tech, and even for Ritu, you mentioned about robotics and engineers. Actually, demand and supply, I come from an economics background, and I come from a master's in applied finance background, right? So for me, that to me is the way I look at things in a bit different, right? Because as much as you can talk about the plant, and whatever the plant grows, you got to sell it, right? So that the demand and supply, and how do you sell it? How do you deliver it? The cold chain, the distribution, you know, it's really going beyond it. For example, when people talk about urban farming and they talk about growing in vertical farms, but you know, one of the growers are growing a lot of kale. But then when you talk about kale, then you have to know in the consumption of kale in Singapore, whether it's chai sim or kale, which is the Chinese version of it, right? It's something that we eat, right? So there are this kind of demand and supply things that sometimes we don't bring that holistic approach in looking at agri-tech, right? The tech word is engineering based, I understand. But at the end of the day, to the question that was actually raised, it's about demand and supply, right? Then when you know the demand and supply, then I think you apply the technology to where the data isn't coming back, where the visibility isn't there. Then you use the technology to get the data that you need so that you can actually be a more informed decision, so that at the end of the day, the CFO is not your enemy. Your CFO is just basically there to make sense of the numbers, right? Make sense that the money works. And like to Wan Lee's point, if all these few points make sense, then at the end of the day, everybody will be happy, right? It's not just about innovation, and it's not about production, and it's not about tech. At the end of the day, if you grow something that can sell well and you reach the real market, then I think that would be a great combination. So I was just talking about economics as one of the key components when we actually put the team together.
What about you, Ritu, Wan Lee, Hans? Do you think there is a framework to conceptualize where deep tech makes sense? Because deep tech comes with risk, complexity, sometimes upfront cost. So it needs to pay off eventually. How would you see your compass to navigate all this?
I mean, definitely, sorry, yeah.
All right.
So Gary has definitely said the right thing. There's a demand, there is a supply, and in between the whole thing, the business must make dollars, right? If it commercially doesn't make sense, it's not taken, right? So definitely applying deep tech does come into agri-tech, but then it has to be a little more flexible, it has to be twisted, it has to be tweaked in a way that it can be applied for that. Because we cannot be solving a 2-cent problem with $1 million solution, that is for sure. Yeah. Yeah, go
Hans,
ahead.
you wanted to add to it.
Yeah, I think that the question goes also about, the question was asked was also about how do you enable the farmers to be able to get more out of the profit, you know, that comes from their products. And, you know, we have to fill in the information gap. You know, in agriculture, you have the producer and then you have a trader that goes in between and buys the products and then redistributes the products, you know. In the United States, they have something called farmers market, where the farmers come out and they sell their products on the market. Of course, it's not a very efficient way of doing it, but you know, Gary's business is dedicated to set up communication between the consumer and the farmer, because now the consumer can actually find out who actually farmed it. And, you know, the consumer can get feedback. So we'd like it more, you know, juicy, or, you know, more red or more gray or whatever color, you know, and that maybe there's a way that can be, or I think technology will find a way to improve that communication. And over time, that will give the farmer more independence.
Yeah, and I just want to add to Hans' point. That's where the digital wallet and like what Ant Financial has done in China, we've done the same philosophy, so that you can actually know whether the farmer really get the money and how do you finance that farmer in time, so that the details of all this information is actually rewarding the farmer at the end of the day for doing the right thing. So just to go back to Hans' point, it really is about the information gap, but at the same time putting them with the right tool so that they can actually use a simple mobile phone that can really enrich their life, and then making sure that we have the ability to have the payment modules to really get that money, so that the farmer can go to a convenience stores and buy the food that he needs, you know, and the things that he do. It has a very practical economic benefit that I think once that is resolved, then a lot of these things will actually show the benefit to all the other farmers.
Thank you so much. I really like all the insight, and sounds like the audience also enjoy. We have a number of questions that we won't be able to address today, but there is a lot of them revolving around the notion of, does it really work? Can you really bring AI? Can you really bring robotics? And how do you communicate across the teams in such a complex environment? I would like really to thank you for being here today. You give us a number of pointers to navigate this fascinating space. I would like to remember two of them, not just because they are probably the most important, and they're not summarizing nor exhausting the topic, but you mentioned sense of purpose, and you mentioned the energy and the passion you put behind, and this cannot be replaced. And I like to thank SGInnovate for sharing our passion for this topic to the point of giving us platform to talk about it today and engaging with as many people as possible. Gary, Wanli, Ritu, Hans, thank you very much for your time. Over to you, Jody.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for wrapping it up nicely, and also to the rest of the panelists for such a lively discussion today. As what Isabel said on behalf of SGInnovate as well, I'd like to thank Ritu, Gary, Hans, and Wanli for taking time out of their busy schedule to join us for this important discussion on tech and talent from adjacent domains, and how we can all work together to contribute to the growing agri-food industry. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for staying. For joining in, tuning in, staying with us throughout the session. And although we were not able to answer all of the questions due to time constraints, I hope that everyone enjoyed the discussion, as well as managed to cover some interesting insights from our 1 hour session today. For the attendees, please also keep a lookout for our post-event EDM, which will include an event recording of the session, so you can share it with your friends who happen to miss the live session today. Lastly, I do hope that we can see you at the rest of our SGInnovate events, and please have a lovely evening or morning from wherever you're tuning from. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.